Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of the Liberal Group, I'd like to extend our condolences to everyone, family and friends, and everyone that knew Linda. She was certainly one of a kind, and she was independent-minded. She didn't slavishly follow a party line. I'm not quite sure what happened within the Conservative group, and she was passionate in arguing her causes, so I don't know if that led to any fallouts at any time. But she'll be a sad loss to Barrowford, a sad loss to Pendle Council, and a sad loss to Pendle as a whole. And we extend our very greatest sympathy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Likewise, on behalf of my group, we share condolences of Linda. I was blessed to serve on a number of committees with Linda, most notably the Grievance Committee, which Linda chaired. And Councillor Whipp's quite right, and Nadine's right as well, that she spoke her mind. But we shared a passion for cricket and would regularly have a discussion before the meeting and also sometimes during the meeting whilst we were supposed to be deliberating on certain issues. But she will be missed in this council chamber, but more importantly, I think she leaves a great hole in Barrowford as a true representative of the people. May she rest in peace.
Thank you very much. Would you do me the honour of standing up and the minute sound for that?
Mayor, can I give apologies for councillors Zafar and Eileen Amsler?
For Councillor Marjorie Adams, it was unwell.
Item 2, declarations of interest. Your Honour. Item 3, recorded votes. Members are reminded in accordance with Rule 17 of the Pendle Council, all votes on the budget issues will be recorded. This includes all motions and amendments. Item 4, standing orders. In accordance with the normal practice of the Council, it is advised to suspend Order 14.3 to allow group leaders to speak on items 5 and 6 for longer than 5 minutes. Okay, item 5, General Fund Review Budget 2022-23. What's the leader of the Council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be taking items 5 and 6 together. Mr. Mayor, last May, Seoul Council moved a Conservative majority administration led by me and our able team of councillors. We hit the ground running and getting a strong grip of the Council's leadership at a challenging time during another extraordinary year as the UK moved into recovery and strong growth in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, whilst managing outbreaks of new variants such as Omicron. My administration has made it a priority that Pendle provides a strong response to our residents and business through the COVID-19 pandemic. This has included distributing £270,000 via the Household Support Fund to help residents meet the cost of living increases. Working with the Pendle Food Alliance and the Burnley and Pendle CBS to provide essential food and other supplies to the many vulnerable people of Pendle who have been directly affected by the impact of COVID-19. Promoting vaccination take-up and ensuring our community are reached through pop-up facilities, the vaccination bus and the current doorstep vaccination service. Working with Lancashire County Council to provide testing within the borough and running an effective local track and trace function complemented by a track and trace payment system to provide much needed support to those who need to isolate. We have also delivered and are still delivering vital support on the government's COVID-19 schemes to the business community here in Pendle. This has included £5 million of new business rate relief to businesses in Pendle, £246,000 of additional restrictions grants, round 5 funding to help local engineering businesses and to support local events, £660,000 support under the Omicron leisure, hospitality and accommodation scheme to grant from business affected by Omicron, and £322,000 under the additional restrictions grant to help local businesses affected by Omicron. Most recently, on the 3rd of February, the government announced the council tax rebate scheme to help with energy bills to give back £150 to all properties in bands A to D. That's £5.64 million for 37,000 properties, plus a further discretionary scheme for households in receipt of council tax benefit that do not pay. We are swiftly putting the necessary arrangements to get their support to people across the borough. At the same time as providing key support to households and businesses across the borough, we have ensured our services were resilient and kept delivering key services for our customers. I would like to take this opportunity of thanking all of the employees of Pendle Borough Council for their hard work delivering the COVID-19 response. I would also like to take this opportunity of thanking the residents of Pendle for rising to the challenges as well and showing their resilience and their community spirit, which certainly brought the best out of people. And there's also been good news in investment in the future of the borough too, and during this period of uncertainty, the council has been able to deliver key regeneration schemes. These include £25 million for Nelson Town Deal, which offers exciting opportunities to regenerate Nelson Town Centre, develop vital skills amongst young people, improve the health and well-being of residents, and celebrate the culture of the town and its people. £6.5 million Levelling Up Fund for Corn, which will breathe new life into the market hall and the bus station, providing much needed housing and will revamp the cultural quarter of the town and help the local economy through investment in three theatres. £0.2 million for key housing and Bankhouse Road through the Brownfield Land Release Fund. £1.15 million for further Head Scheme, which will provide further vital housing, and £3.5 million for Longshire Phase 1 Extension Scheme to continue to be developed. This will provide much needed additional employment land for the borough. And I'm proud that we as an administration have delivered a number of other positive improvements since May. These include delivering a number of new housing and regeneration schemes through Cllrs, including the impressive Northlight Mill development and the soon-to-be completed Harrison Drive scheme with Cllrs together, which will see the provision of low-carbon affordable homes. Securing a new joint venture partner, Brookhouse, for the next stages of the council's work on regeneration. Responding to the climate emergency by piloting the use of alternative low-carbon fuels for our vehicle fleet. Planting 4,225 trees by the end of March across the district alongside nearly 60 volunteers from our community. Supporting 12 young people in gaining valuable experience as part of the government's Kickstart scheme. 7 from this group have finished their placements, have all gone on to new employment either with the council or to external opportunities. Continuation of the school holiday activity schemes targeted at young people in receipt of free school meals and people in the lowest 40% of the income scale. Approval of a new economic recovery and growth strategy, and participation in Lancashire Community Renewal Fund with emphasis on growth, employment and skills. The Council has seen many changes since last year. Firstly, in May, the electorate voted for a Conservative majority bringing forward a new leader of the Council to lead the new administration. Secondly, the Chief Executive left the Council. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Newman for long and loyal service to this Council. We were joined by Rose Rouse as our new Chief Executive in October and Richard Gibson as our new Chief Financial Officer in November 2021. As with any change, the fear of the new often creates uncertainty for some, but it also offers the opportunity to look at old problems in a new way and bring a fresh pair of eyes to existing problems. It was following these appointments that key steps taken forward the Council began. So whilst these changes could be seen as threats, they present great opportunities for the Council to develop. Earlier this month, we welcomed a group of Council leaders and senior officers to Pendle as part of the Corporate Peer Challenge. Our peers were impressed by the team they were met by here in Pendle and the plans which are now being taken forward to transform how the Council works. Moving on to the 2020-23 budget. The starting point for the budget is the medium-term forecast, which was brought by the then Chief Executive and Section 151 Officer in June 2021. The existing medium-term forecast shows a need to find on ongoing revenue savings of over £3.5 million per annum by 2024-25 and a total of £8.3 million over the next 3 years. The Government announced a 3-year spending review in October 2021 Pendle, there was 7.4% increase in core spending power worth over 0.79 million. The spending review did cap the amount of money available for local government at the 2022-23 level, which will not increase and therefore gives Pendle a fixed monetary envelope to work within the next 3 years. The government assumes Pendle will increase council tax by the maximum available of 1.99% without a referendum. The revised position forecast still shows a gap in reserves of £8 million over the next 3 years after the £1 million gap in 2022-23. Current reserves are 9.95 million, so we will need to focus now on a 3-year plan to stabilise and repair that position. The 2022-23 budget is based on the following changes since June 2021. Savings of 0.073 million were agreed at the P&R Committee on the 25th of November 2021. A reduction in the management fee paid to Pendle Leisure Trust of £165,000 is proposed. The Trust needs to develop a business plan and to work with the Council to share the pain we as a Council are feeling whilst developing the service for the residents of Pendle. A 1.99% increase in council tax is needed to increase income by 0.131 million. Whilst these simple steps clearly leave the Council's 2022-23 finances with a very unpalatable budget gap of just under £1 million, the Council needs to take a more considered and medium-term position if it is going to plan and deliver better services to its residents in the future. There is clearly insufficient funding in the local government system despite increased funding in 2022-23. However, simply repeating this fact will not change the position and it won't change Pendle Borough Council. Lobbying and writing letters is easy. Making and taking decisions can be difficult. Whilst we need to cut our coat to suit our cloth, we also need to think ahead, to be bold and to have ambition for Pendle. We need a combination of evolution and step changes. This was also clear from the recent peer challenge. Pendle Borough Council is therefore proposing a transformation programme which was agreed at Council in December 21. This will sit on top of the current financial strategy which focuses on growing, stocking, saving, charging. But this approach needs to evolve. The growth element is not strong enough to deliver the changes needed on its own, and we need to look at a new methodology. With the simple options to deliver critical savings seemingly exhausted, the Council must now urgently progress more complicated and transformational changes and look again at the difficult decisions. It must use its reserves to invest, to save, to deliver repeatable savings over many years and not solely on protecting services for a single year. A number of key opportunities have also been identified and if delivered will ensure the financial sustainability of the Council. In view of their size and complexity, they require additional capacity and in some cases capability to deliver. To maximise the opportunity and to ensure those changes meet financial timelines. As the transformation journey progresses, further opportunities will of course be identified, just as they will through future budget reviews and other cost analysis. Indeed, it is fully anticipated that a range of charges and savings will start to come through in 2022-23 across a range of areas, reducing the initially budgeted use of reserves. I'd like to also take opportunity to thank Councillor David Colburn-Price and the rest of our group for all the work done on the budget so far and for developing the well-tested, robust and deliverable proposals we're putting forward. The corporate peer challenge offered an opportunity to review Pendle's strategic approach and has brought fantastic insight into how we can move forward together as a council, focusing on our vision and our priorities, on the efficient delivery of services and the effective performance and contributions of officers and councillors alike. And before I close, Mr Mayor, I'd like to mention our proposals for council tax. Reluctantly, we need to increase council tax by 1.99% to meet the challenges of inflation and increases in our costs. This is lower than both the county council increase of 3.99% and lower than the average town council increase of 3%. A 1.99% increase will increase the weekly B and D from £276.01 to £281.50, an increase of £5.49. Over 60% of our dwellings are in Band A, for which the equivalent increase would be £3.66, giving rise to Band A charge of £187.67, up from £184.01 in this year. Accordingly, I move the General Revenue Fund Budget, 2022-23 and the Capital Programme. I also want to get to moving the resolution which is on the sheets which are before us in terms of the budget estimates and adequacy of reserves. I move, and I would like to ask Councillor David Price to second the motion.
Thank you, Nadine. As the officer's report clearly says, this is a stark position for the council, and there are inevitable financial decisions that the authority faces. Carry on as we've been doing for the last few years, making little or no changes to the updated budget, and the wage growth and inflationary pressures will mean that we will use up 8.3 million of reserves over the next 4 years, and there will be nothing left. Absolutely nothing. We agreed a few tweaks following recommendations from service heads back in November, asking them to consider extra charges, extra savings, and the necessary step changes has not yielded anything new. And of course, we always want to make sure we're able to provide the council's high quality services to the public and other stakeholders. That is, after all, what they pay for. In discussions with the interim and current CFOs, we looked at all the statutory, discretionary and fixed costs. It's a very long list of them. It's still being investigated, but with all the staffing changes in the finance team, no clear picture of meaningful options for councils to consider has emerged. Now, emerging from COVID with new working practices in society creates opportunities to look again at how we do things. That is why the approach is crystallised into the CEO and CFO's transformation programme that we correctly voted to support with a £250,000 invest to save budget, using specialist resources to investigate and deliver. We absolutely support this approach as the only way to deliver the necessary step change in the council's operations, delivery methods and its finances. And we stand alongside management in developing and delivering the programme, prudently using our resources and our reserves in the short term for a sustainable long-term solution, and in monitoring its progress and its outcomes. This is the first stage of a 3-year budget, not a 1-year sticking plaster. As noted in the officer's report, revisiting the Liberator contract and their scope and delivery model, and the design and delivery of environmental services won't deliver any benefits in year 1. But the management fee for Leisure Trust can be reduced now, and we support the package of measures in the report to give a total reduction of £250,000, and we must insist that the Leisure Trust produce a detailed, costed business plan for the next 3 years, reflecting the same sort of transformation that the council is going through and sharing the journey with us. Our group's budget is based on the savings and charges that our financial analysis and the officer's immediate priorities are identified as being robust and deliverable. These include reviewing the corporate estate and the capital programme, reviewing various fees, resources and delivery models for building control, pest control, office admin, and continuing to dig deep into a wide range of council cost centres. In addition, the structures, the scope, and the efficiency and effectiveness of our council's committees. I conclude by repeating this is the first stage of a 3-year transformation and a 3-year budget, not a 1-year sticking plaster. Accordingly, I support the recommendations for both the General Fund, the Capital Fund and the estimate.
Thank you. Councillor Whipp, would you like to respond, speak?
Presenting our
Yeah.
Mr Mayor, I assume that I'm presenting as an amendment to our budget, and
Yes.
then there'll be a general discussion, or you can just help me and other councillors. What's the process, please?
Can you put your budget forward, and then we'll have a discussion afterwards?
So
Can you put in any amendments forward?
yeah, so I present our budget as an amendment. There will be a debate on our amendment, and if that falls or either way,
Yes.
then I assume it will be Councillor Whipp to present his amendment.
Yes, and then we'll go from
And
there.
then if that fails, is there then opportunity to speak on the main motion?
I'll sit down.
No, you need to get yours.
Okay, just to clarify everything. So if you give your budget, and this recommendation, then we'll have a general conversation afterwards.
Okay, well, I'll have the opportunity to come back on the general debate. That's what I'm asking you, Mr Mayor.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, there is.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Mr Mayor, I'm rising to move the Labour Group's budget as an amendment for consideration this evening. But before I begin, I'd like to thank Richard on behalf of our group for his assistance in making sure that our figures added up, because that's crucial as the interim 151 officer. Mr Mayor, the Prime Minister has talked about levelling up the North since his election in 2019, and I'm disappointed but not actually surprised that he talks the talk but never walks the walk to really level up areas like Pendle, who disproportionately have been hammered by this Conservative government since 2010. We've lost tens of millions of pounds of funding since 2010. And it's a fact, Mr Mayor, that year after year our core budgets and spending powers have been slashed. Yet as a council, we've continued to provide frontline services to our residents who rely on them. It's also unsatisfactory, Mr Mayor, that we have in place a Member of Parliament who, despite his photo opportunities, is more focused on progressing his own political career than actually standing up and lobbying for a fair funding deal for Pendle. It's also ironic that during COVID, when sadly many Pendle residents died, the government, including the Prime Minister, were taking us all for fools and partying at our expense. This, along with other decisions, proves the fact it's one rule for us and as Pendle residents and one for the Conservatives. Moving on to our budget proposals, Mr Mayor. Our budget proposals include 3 growth items. One of the main frontline services our residents judge us on is our high-quality street cleansing services. As you and your Conservative colleagues voted through cuts to street cleaning, our group believes this is a backward step affecting residents living across Pendle. And following discussions with officers, we propose a sum of £30,000 and seek cross-party approval to reverse this particular cut. Secondly, over recent years, Mr Mayor, we collectively have all, following lobbying from local people, discussed at full council and area committees the scourge of speeding and inconsiderate drivers who believe that whether it's in Bonaldswick, Earby, Corn, Nelson, Briarfield, Barrowford, it's an adrenaline rush to see how fast and how loud they can drive, causing a nuisance to law-abiding citizens. I'm aware that Lancashire Road Safety Partnership and the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner have funding available to help us tackle this important issue, yet seem reluctant to do so. I want to congratulate both Briarfield and Nelson Town Council colleagues who have already agreed in principle to provide funding from their budget for this vital work. Our budget proposals include a sum of £45,000 to use as an accelerated funding pot, and we hope our other partners who I've mentioned earlier will work with us to boost this pot to at least £500,000 to use available technology and other resources to hit those idiots who have no regard for Pendle residents where it hurts them. Mr Mayor, the Leader is publicly on record in the run-up to last May's elections saying that he would protect our green fields. He's not actually mentioned anything in terms of giving us an update on that this evening. However, his leadership will be judged on his lack of action, namely the failure to approve the local plan, which is leading to developers queuing up for our greenfields. And likewise, he and some of his colleagues made an issue of the green lung between Nelson and Corn, but sadly yet another failure was to do what the council and residents told them to do, suggests to me and people across Pendle that this Conservative leadership is paying lip service to the green agenda and climate change. To this extent, we are proposing a further £25,000 to boost climate change works, and we believe it's vital all councillors work together before it's too late. Mr Mayor, I'm giving advance notice that if our budget proposals are not accepted en bloc, I will be moving separate amendments on our growth items. I move.
Thank you, Councillor. Mayor will second that.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I'll happily second the Labour Group budget.
Thank you. Councillor Luke, down for the deal. Is there anyone to speak on the Labour's amendments? Councillor, I'm just taking advice.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, can I sorry, Councillor, I thought you'd indicated that we tabled all the budgets and then have a general discussion. That was what you said earlier.
Yes. I thought it was one at a time and we voted.
Yeah, no, voting we vote one at a time, but the Mayor said that you...
I'm getting confused again. Can't take advice again. And do it individually. Yeah? Right,
Okay.
No, Mr Mayor, I think the normal protocol would have been for all three group leaders to put the proposals on the table. I would give notice of a further amendment in due course, but I want to speak to the generality of what's been moved. I'm not going to reserve the matters.
yeah.
You know, I am expected to stand up. I've got a speech to make, and this is the appropriate time to do it.
Okay, I've been advised. You can make that speech next. I'm only going with what I'm advised, so please bear with me.
Okay.
Okay, so will you please sit down. We'll talk about the amendment from the Labour as I've been advised. Okay, I've been advised. So, Councillor?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, the Labour budget, I suppose you could say it balances, but it just uses more reserves. I thought we had a stark position for the council, but that seems to be ignored. Budgetary irresponsibility. Easy to spend money, get a few votes now and again. Having a go at the government, all the usual stuff.
But they're not giving us anything.
Actually attending climate change meetings would be a good idea, if you're interested in that. And another one on the scourge of speeding vehicles is that Cone area, for example, we've allocated a load of funds. We're working with the police, we're working with the private providers to supply devices, and we're working with the various councils, town and parish, to set in some procedures to actually supervise and look after these people, keep an eye on them. So it's a budget that doesn't help Pendle Council's finances, and it might be good to have a short-term fix, but that's a little sticky for us to try to get a tick in the box. So I reject the amendment.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak? Let's make this go.
Well, he was presumably replying to the debate.
He has the last word.
Last word.
Let's slow down, let's do it properly, and listen to advice. What's the advice you're giving me now? Okay, you're going to respond to the motion, sir.
Mr Mayor,
The amendment.
I wish to speak to the amendment. I mean, and I have to do so before Councillor Ahmed speaks.
Right, just everybody sit down. Right, everybody quiet down. You, sir, stand up to speak on the amendment.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Mr Mayor, as far as the Labour amendment is concerned, I'm afraid that our colleagues, I mean, physically to the right, perhaps politically to the left, but perhaps not, I'm afraid they're losing touch with reality. And Councillor Iqbal knows full well that Pendle's position has been parlous for the past 10 years. And although many budget savings have been achieved during that time, there still is a gap of some £8 million looking at the next 3 years. So it is wholly unrealistic to put forward a proposal tonight that includes no new savings or further savings, proposes extra expenditure, and as a consequence, just off the top of my head, takes the raid on the reserves on the Labour proposal to over £1.7 million. Now, it just doesn't stack up. And I'm fully in favour of having a better street cleaning service, and we voted against the Conservative cuts for that were forced through Council back in December. I'm all in favour of having additional funding for addressing climate change, and the 25,000 neatly matches the amount which the Conservatives raided from the climate change investment budget in order to pay a member of staff. And I'm all in favour of additional public safety measures. But they just cannot be afforded unless there are compensating savings elsewhere. And the underlying position of that £8 million budget gap is actually addressed as well. So I'm afraid, with the greatest reluctance, our group cannot support what Labour are putting forward here tonight. They have lost touch with reality. They have lost touch with the needs of Pendle residents and council in achieving a balanced budget for the foreseeable future. We will be voting against.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Whipp.
Yeah, I profile all what Councillor Whipp has said, and I would love to stand here and say, yes, I want to support the climate change budget, and actually for public safety measures. Who wouldn't? But let's get real. All we've heard from the Labour group is anti-government slogans, the same speech that we've heard year in, year out, that we've lost this funding. What has that changed? Absolutely nothing. So I think it's time to get real, face the facts. We are where we are, and we deal with the difficult decisions that we need to make. And we can only do that if we are all working together as a council and be sensible about it. The growth items, like I said, are in principle fine. But Councillor Iqbal talks about putting street cleaning. That funding is already in place. I'll take Councillor Iqbal in his ward, some of the streets in his patch, what the ward council is doing about it. So that hasn't changed anything. I think it needs more than just simply continuously putting extra funding into street cleaning. And all I see really is from the Labour proposals is a spending spree. And I've heard this from Councillor Iqbal previously, on a fag packet budget. This is exactly that. This is exactly that. Drawn up with no thought, no ideas, and total financial incompetence and irresponsibility. And all we're really seeing is here electioneering at its best, because that's all the Labour group can put forward. And it's sad to see, because all we're really seeing is something for the Labour group putting down leaflets, and I think that's a real shame when we've got real difficult decisions and challenges to make, and we're just playing silly politics again. Thank you.
Clapping
take a vote on Councillor Iqbal's amendment, sorry. So,
this is recorded though, councillors, and on the amendment, the Labour budget as an amendment to the Conservative. Councillor Adnan.
against.
Councillor Armour.
For.
Councillor Ahmed.
Against.
Councillor Albin.
Against.
Councillor Anwar. Councillor Ashram.
For.
Councillor Aslan.
Against.
Councillor Butterworth.
Against.
Councillor Carrot.
Against.
Councillor David Colburn-Price.
Against.
Councillor Sarah Colburn-Price.
Against.
Councillor Gould-Thorpe.
Against.
Councillor Harrison.
Against.
Councillor Hennig.
For.
Councillor Howard.
Against.
Councillor Mohammed Iqbal.
For.
Councillor Yasser Iqbal.
For.
Councillor Lockwood.
Against.
Councillor Leonti. Councillor Lord.
Against.
Councillor McGovery.
Against.
Councillor McGowan.
Against.
Councillor Mahmood.
For.
Councillor Newman.
Against.
Councillor Purcell.
Against.
Councillor Saki. For. Councillor Sutcliffe.
Against.
Councillor David Whipp.
Against.
Councillor Tomley.
Against.
For, 21 against, motion split. Councillor Iqbal, you give notice to move favour another motion?
Well, am I tabling my further amendments now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. For the sake of repeating myself, can I move as a further amendment that the council reinstates the street cleaning cost to the tune of £30,000?
Mr Mayor, point of order. In December, Council voted through reductions in the street cleaning budget. And my understanding is that our standing orders prevent the reversal of the decision at full council within 6 months of the original decision. I don't know what the fancy wording is, but it seems to me, and our group did look at that because we did think that we opposed it at the time, we would wish to oppose it now, but I'm just checking through you, Mr Mayor, the validity of reversing a decision that the council took in December.
Thank you, sir. In the case of budget items, it is valid. Okay? More? Without speaking any more? You want to second this?
Second, Mr Mayor.
Second it. So we'll vote on that motion. Any more speakers? No, we'll vote on. Councillor?
Just one thing, Senator, which was the point we made when we decided it before, was the fact that this was a recommendation from David Walker as Environmental Services Manager. He's the one that analysed the use of resources, where they're best deployed, are the best results. So it's easy to decide the same way again.
Thank you, Councillor. You want to vote? One more speaker?
Mr Mayor, just on that point, obviously the office of the council, that's advice from the council. We are councillors, we are elected by the people. This is our chance, Mr Mayor. Councillor Dean made a point about, I think, cleaning up in Bradley, but I'm not sure what the point was, or something about cleaning. But I think he was making the point that there is litter everywhere. I think that was the point he was making. This is our chance. I think he's agreeing with it. So this is our chance, Mr Mayor, that we vote in favour of this. We can't keep voting for cutbacks. On the previous motion, I'm not sure if members opposite knew what they were clapping for, but what they were clapping was reductions and cutbacks. And this is your chance, members of the council, to vote against cutbacks. And it's been seconded already, but I'm fully in favour of Councillor Iqbal's amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. Going to the vote.
If you're for the amendment, please say for. If you're against, please say against. If you're abstaining, please say abstain. Councillor Adnan.
Against.
Councillor Armour.
4.
Councillor Ahmed.
Against.
Councillor Alvin.
Against.
Councillor Anwar. Councillor Ashraf.
For.
Councillor Aslam.
Against.
Councillor Butterworth. Councillor Carroll.
Against.
Councillor David Coburn Price.
Against.
Councillor Sarah Coburn Price.
Against.
Councillor Dewthorpe.
Against.
Councillor Harrison.
Against.
Councillor Hanif.
For.
Councillor Howard.
Against.
Councillor Mohammed Iqbal. Councillor Yasser Iqbal.
4.
Councillor Lockwood.
Against.
Councillor Leonti.
Against.
Councillor Lord.
Abstain.
Councillor McGladdery.
Against.
Councillor McGowan.
Against.
Councillor Mahmood.
For.
Councillor Newman. Councillor Purcell.
Against.
Councillor Siki. 4. Councillor Sutcliffe.
Against.
Councillor David Cliff.
Abstain.
Councillor Tomley.
Abstain.
Four abstentions, 8-4, 17 against. The amendment is failed. Yes, sir? One more?
Me?
Yes.
Yeah. Can I move £45,000 as match funding for public safety measures, Mr Mayor?
You can.
Second that, Mr
Second
Mayor.
it, yeah. All those in favour, any more speakers? Yeah, we'll the vote.
Councillor Adler.
Against.
Councillor Armour.
4.
Councillor Ahmed.
Against.
Councillor Alvin.
Against.
Councillor Anwar.
For.
Councillor Ashraf. Councillor Aslam.
Against.
Councillor Butterworth. Councillor Carroll.
Against.
Councillor David Coburn Price.
Against.
Councillor Sarah Coburn Price.
Against.
Councillor Dewthorpe.
Against.
Councillor Harrison.
Against.
Councillor Hanif. Councillor Howard.
Against.
Councillor Mohammed Iqbal.
4.
Councillor Yasser Iqbal.
4.
Councillor Lockwood.
Against.
Councillor Leonti.
Yes.
Councillor Lord.
Abstain.
Councillor McGladdery.
Against.
Councillor McGowan.
Against.
Councillor Mahmood.
For.
Councillor Newman.
Abstain.
Councillor Purcell.
Against.
Councillor Siki. Councillor Sutcliffe.
Against.
Councillor David Lee.
Abstain.
Councillor Tomlin.
Abstain.
Mr Mayor,
Yes.
I've carefully counted the number of councillors in the room, and I cannot. Is there somebody sat behind it?
Yes.
Put my hand up. Put my hand up. Anyway, hiding away.
No way opposed. We wouldn't
The
try
shame
and
of
come in. So, 4 abstained, 8-4, 17 against, so once again it is failed. No more, thank you. Councillor Whipp, could I attend to your budget?
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks.
I dare say our voting in the last set of amendments one-to-one friends and influence people, but I do think we need to have credibility, prudence and sensibility in putting forward our budget proposals here tonight. The underlying underfunding of services for Pendle residents is something that has been a thread running through the budgets that we have debated and agreed in Pendle for many years. Over the next 3 years, there is an £8 million funding shortfall, despite the fact that we have achieved budget reductions over the last decade of in excess of £10 million. And that's not £10 million over the lot, that is a £10 million reduction in the budget, so the cumulative savings add up to scores of millions of pounds in total. The position is not set to get any better It hasn't improved to any noticeable degree this year, and just on that, the Leader of the Council referred to the core spending power, which is the headline figure that the government put out about, well, council's core spending power will increase. Well, of course, the core spending power includes the 2% council tax increase in itself. And it's another example of the rather dishonest way in which the government portray the finances and devalue, really, the work that local government does. Like the Leader of the Council, I am very proud indeed about the investment that we have been making as Pendle Council, and of course the work that's been carried out during the course of this last 12 months is what was put in place by the previous administrations. The brownfield development by our joint venture Pearl is the culmination of well nigh 15 years of work, and the investment at Briarfield Mill is, I think, one of the jewels in the crown of that strategy, which has seen so much needed regeneration work taking place. Oak Mill in Colne is another example where, at our insistence, we got that site bought, we got housing developed on that brownfield site. But as I said, it's a culmination of a decade and a half of investment, which began here in Nelson with the houses in Whitefield Ward, and where there's been a considerable amount of renewal in Briarfield as well. One that particularly interests me is the investment that we have made in flood alleviation works, and we prioritise flood defences as a council some years ago. Very pleased at the completion of the work at Gill Meadows and the work that is currently being carried out at Newcote in Erie through European funding, which we were able to get several years ago, but through the hoops and the hurdles that the Environment Agency put in the way, is only just being done now. And it's notable, Mr Mayor, that there was a flood scare at this weekend due to the most recent storm, and fortunately a disaster was averted, and grateful for the work that Pendle Council officers did in putting sandbags out and the like. But coming back to the budget, sadly, the proposals put forward by the Conservative are laughably lacking. Their so-called 3-year budget is just kicking the can down the road. It's a desperate disappointment that no apparent effort has been made to bridge the budget gap. Decisions have been ducked. In previous years, when we've been saving £1 million and more in each budget cycle, over half the savings have been achieved by the time that we got to the December budget meeting. I think the equivalent figure this year, and unfortunately it's stuck at that, was something like £73,000. So contrast the way in which previous administrations have got in-year savings achieved consensus and achieved a majority in the council by the time that we've got a couple of months away from the budget meeting itself. There's been a majority administration in Pendle this last year. There haven't been the constraints of getting that consensus, getting agreement across groups, and working together to achieve a common position that we can all agree on. And yet, the actual savings that have been delivered are pathetically small. And here we have tonight a proposal from the controlling group which is a will-o'-the-wisp, something that, well, we're going to do this transformation programme and there will be these things flowing from it. There are actually elements in that which I'll come back to in a minute, which are wholly unacceptable as far as I'm concerned, and I think they'll be unacceptable to residents in Pendle as well. But it's all dressed up as transformation, as if there's some magic wand with that word that you can use and cast a spell, and all of a sudden you have transformed the services. Well, quite frankly, I think that's laughable in itself. I'd like to think about council tax increases themselves. The unaffordability of continuous council tax increases as the government year after year after year taxes residents through the back door by jacking up the amount of money that people have to pay in council tax. Now, there was reference earlier in the meeting to the value of properties in Pendle, the fact that 2/3 of them are Band A. The fact is that the Band D figure for council tax is amongst the highest in the country. And here we have a Conservative county council who is putting an extra £58.10 on the bills of those Band D council taxpayers. And that's added to, of course, by the more modest increases from Pendle Council, parish councils and the like. But the cumulative, I'll forget that word, the year-on-year impact of those increases is generally becoming unsustainable. It is just not in any shape or form possible for that level of council tax increase to be sustained, and yet that is what the government expect. And they have a very deliberate policy of loading things onto the council tax. So each year people pay more and get less. Now this year there's going to be a £150 rebate, which is supposed to be some sort of compensation for the swinging increases in energy bills. But that's a one-off. I would dearly love it to actually be a realistic reduction that was year on year reducing the cost of council tax, but somehow I don't think that's going to be the case. So, Mr. Mayor, desperately disappointed. The efforts of the controlling Conservative group have been wholly inadequate. Last year, the Liberal group were the only ones to propose a reduction in the cost of the contract of Liberator. And at the budget meeting, well, prior to the budget meeting, when we published our proposals, we proposed a £250,000 reduction. Eventually, the council achieved a £200,000 reduction in the cost of the Liberator contract. But that's been swallowed up now by the inflation increase that is built into it. Again, this year, we are the only group proposing a reduction in the cost of the Liberator contract. We believe there is a significant reduction that can be achieved, and we believe that some of that saving we can make in this financial year. So we are proposing a reduction of £300,000 in the current financial year, with a view to the full year saving being at least £600,000. We are also proposing, Mr Mayor, that there is a restructuring of Pendle Council to achieve £150,000 saving in the next financial year, and with a view to a £300,000 saving in a full financial year. We're also proposing a £50,000 vacancy factor, which would help reduce the budget gap. And perhaps controversially, and certainly not winning friends and influencing people on both sides of the chamber, to my left and to my right, we are proposing an increase in cemetery fees, which is less than that put forward by council staff, but consistent with our proposal for a phased increase in cemetery fees, which we have advocated for the last couple of years. Altogether, Mr Mayor, our savings would reduce the budget by more than what the Conservatives are saying. It would reduce the call on reserves, which is above £1.5 million. And the Conservative proposals would still raid the reserves to the tune of £1 million and more. Mr Mayor, we would like to see sensible, prudent savings. We would like to see this council agreeing solid and concrete proposals that have some semblance of achievability. And if we look at the Conservative group, it's all up in the air, isn't it? Transformation programme, year one savings, from actions around the corporate estate, a review of various fees. Well, I wonder what they might be. They didn't have the bottle to actually increase fees when they had the opportunity during the current year. Perhaps too frightened to say, well, yeah, we're going to have charges for bulky household waste. So, which fees are you going to put up? Why haven't you said that during the year when you've had the opportunity? Review resources and review models for building control, pest control, office admin, as well as revising the structures, the scope and the efficiency and effectiveness of our council's committees. That's code, by the way, for scrapping the area committees, something that people in each part of Pendle very much appreciate. And then just have a, £500,000, roll it all together, and you actually don't know what you voted for at all, do you? So, Mr Mayor, I move this amendment. I hope that people will be sensible and accept that this is put forward in good faith. I appreciate there are elements of it that will not be acceptable. Cemetery fees, both Conservative and Labour, have come out against those. But if we are going to bridge that budget gap of £8 million, we do need to put solid, sensible savings forward. And this is what our budget amendment includes. So I would move it, Mr Mr Mayor, I would urge members of the council not to slavishly follow the party vote, but actually to put their hands up and support what you know is sensible. I move.
May I have a second?
Mr Mayor, I won't go everything, but I think our amendment for the budget is a very sensible solution. The reduction in the draft contract, entirely reasonable. I think the cemetery fees as well, I mean, we did push this for previous years. While I can fully appreciate the personal religious reasons for burying loved ones, not everyone in Pendle does, and I think it's wrong in some ways to subsidise that out of council tax for those constituents who don't bury their loved ones, and I think we should represent that, and that it should at least pay for itself. Not saying it should make money, never, but it shouldn't leave a red line on our budget. Mr Mayor, Councillor Corbyn Price said there were robust proposals for savings in the Conservative budget. All I saw was a £500,000 round figure sum with a bunch of buzzwords highlighted in yellow. I don't see that as robust suggestions. I think that the in-code description of getting rid of the area committees is a lead balloon. I think we should be very proud of our area committee system. It's a good form of local representative government, and that the small savings you might get from centralising every committee is a lot less of a benefit than that democratic representation gives. I mean, I don't really know what half these buzzwords are supposed to mean. Again, they're not robust at all. I'm sure Councillor Corbyn Price could explain them in great detail, and I hope he does, for the benefit of members who will be voting on this tonight. Thank you. I second.
Thank you very much. Would anyone like to speak on Newman?
In many ways, I applaud the sentiment behind it in terms of wanting to save money. It's actually responsible. It's a responsible thing to do, something that our Labour colleagues unfortunately don't understand. There is a budget gap, there is a limited amount of reserves, and we have to nurture them and use them sensibly. However, words like credible, etc., about the suggestions made do rather descend into being almost magical in terms of let's sit down with deliberation, let's say give us £600,000 saving, just like that. Well, how? What are the big plans to make that happen? Same with PPC restructuring. What are the vaguest descriptions known to man? At least my list had some actual names of things which are cost centres rather than PPC restructuring. That's not going anywhere. The whole restructuring programme is part of the general transformation as part of a 3-year programme. I'm sure our officers here would not want to say, yes, let's do a transformation like that. It's a 1-year, quick, short-term decision. Let's go for it. And oh, hang on, what about year 2? What about year 3? Oh, well, hang on a minute. We've just done exactly what we've done in previous years, which is lurch from 1 year to the next year to the next year, without a proper plan in place. Try thinking about the destination, rather than just the, where's the next service station to stop at and spend some money. Things like the vacancy factor. I had to look that one up, actually. Could mean 2 things, actually. One is related to rent, the other one, as you say, I think is related to the fact that somebody leaves, you don't recruit somebody in time, therefore you save their money for that period of a few months. I'm sure the council budget will have that as an upside generally. Cemetery fees, I think that is one of the ones on our list for sure. It does need a definite revisit, it needs a definite simplification. I've seen the pages, I think you've all, those of you with stamina have read the number of pages with all the different pricing options. I think that should be simplified. for sure. So, a little fantastical, and unfortunately I must therefore reject your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My group won't be supporting the Liberal Democrat budget because in terms of the cemetery fees, our position has been consistent over the last few years that it's a step too far. But can I congratulate Councillor Whipp in actually getting out some element of truth out of Councillor Corbyn Price, because the cat is now starting to come out of the bag that the death tax will be introduced by the Conservative group, because he simply he's just said it and it's on camera and people can review it afterwards. But I'll be talking in terms of the Conservative budget later on, because if you want to talk about waffle, talk about that particular paragraph. But, you know, I'd like to commend Councillor Whipp, you know, the way that he's enticed out of the Conservative group in terms of cemetery fees, what they're going to do. At least let them be bold and honest with the people tonight and tell them what they mean, rather than hiding behind this rubbish, waffle and rubbish that they've put forward. I'll speak against that when it comes to the time, Mr. Mayor, but, you know, thank you, Councillor Whipp, and slowly but surely the truth is starting to come out against the Conservatives.
Always does.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor, you can come back.
Yeah, if I may just respond to the debate. As I said at the outset, I didn't think the Labour group would be supporting our cemetery fee charges, but I think needs must. Councillor David Corbyn Price said, well, you know, we're not just going to be able to sit down with Liberator and achieve savings. Well, I'll just go back 12 months and my group proposed saving £250,000 from the Liberator contract through a technicality, a change control notice. Now, what we did was we sat down with Liberator and the saving wasn't as great as I would have hoped, and the decision was actually taken when Councillor Ahmed had taken over as leader of the council. But we achieved a reduction of £200,000. So it is perfectly possible to sit down with Liberator, to negotiate and achieve a reduction in the cost of that contract. And if this council is going to be able to get into a long-term, sustainable, balanced budget, it is going to have to do that. And it is not beyond the wit of man to actually achieve that. And I understand that our Chief Executive, Rose, is already in discussion with Liberator. So I just refute what Councillor David Corbyn Price has said, that, you know, we can't just sit down with Liberator. Yes, we can. Yes, we should. And yes, we must. That is the only way that we will have a balanced budget in 3 years' time. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm pleased to hear Councillor David Corbyn Price said, well, you know, there's some sensible stuff in here. Well, yeah, of course there is. You guys put your hand up for it. Don't just vote against it on party political advantage. You know, get your hands up. Let's get it implemented.
Just a couple of points on the amendment. In terms of, firstly, in terms of the Liberals contract, I don't think we can simply put a figure in the amendment and say £600,000, because it's a bit more complicated than that, as we all really do understand. There's legal implications within a legally binding contract, and we'd be in clear breach of contract if we just said we're not going to pay you £600,000 less. That can only be achieved through discussion, which discussions I accept are taking place. There's no certainty whatsoever that that £600,000 reduction in the contract can be achieved. So for that reason, I cannot support that amendment. In terms of discussion about the previous years, I mean, even in previous years, yes, there have been significant savings, but the significant reserves have been used year after year to balance budget. So that hasn't really worked either. That's the reason we're saying, look, let's look at all this from a disparate perspective overall and transform the whole council. In terms of the phased increase in cemetery fees, again, our group won't be supporting this, especially at a time when just going in COVID even now, so many people have suffered, and we talk about the costs and expenses that people are having to face in this country. There's emotion later on as well, so again, cannot accept that. Just coming on to what Councillor Iqbal said in terms of death tax, that's totally not what Councillor Price said.
What did he say?
Wasn't, is it? It says if you were listening, yeah, we'll listen to it. It says simplify. It did mention an increase. It says simplify the system, which we were at a meeting, Councillor Iqbal, you were there, and that's what we were talking about. There's a lot of confusion about the cost of grades, etc. And that process already started. I've been working with officers to simplify the process so our residents know exactly what they're paying for. You were at the meeting along with the councillors, and that's what we're talking about here. So please stop spreading fear amongst the community as always. And in terms of the transformation programme, I mean, I suppose you could argue restructuring Pendle Council is part of that. So I'm glad to see the amendment does partly take that on board, but overall, our group cannot support the amendment.
Thank you. Anyone for this? Okay. No one's in the vote.
Councillor Ratner?
Against.
Councillor Armour?
Against.
Councillor Ahmed?
Yes.
Councillor Alvin?
Against.
Councillor Anwar?
Against.
Councillor Ashcraft?
Against.
Councillor Aslan?
Against.
Councillor Butterworth? Councillor Carroll?
Against.
Councillor David Coleman Price?
Against.
Councillor Sarah Coleman Price?
Against.
Councillor Gilthorpe?
Against.
Councillor Harrison?
Against.
Councillor Hanif?
Against.
Councillor Howard?
Against.
Councillor Mohammed Iqbal?
Against.
Councillor Yasser Iqbal?
Against.
Councillor Lockwood?
Against.
Councillor Leontis? Councillor Laws?
For.
Councillor McGladdery?
Against.
Councillor McGowan?
Against.
Councillor Mahmood?
For.
Councillor Newman?
For.
Councillor Purcell?
Against.
Councillor Shakir?
Against.
Councillor Sutcliffe?
Against.
Councillor David Whipp?
For.
Councillor Tom Whipp?
For.
Yes. Figures are 5 for, 24 against, motion amendment 6. Thank you.
Back to the main one.
Okay,
The main one.
back to the main motion. Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of the original motion moved by the Leader of the Council, I mean, historically, the Leader of the Council will set out the detail in terms of the budget, but consistent to his form since Mayor, what we heard from the Leader was waffle. Absolute waffle and not a word in terms of the budget. And then he relied on the de facto Leader to give us some detail, but in reality there was no detail, because if you look what the Conservative £500,000 savings stroke cuts means, I mean, Councillor Coburn Price, and people will refresh their memories when they look at the video, thanks to Councillor Tom Whipp, what he actually started to say. But, Mr Mayor, what I would ask Councillor Ahmed as Leader of the Council is be honest with the people of Pendle and tell us what cuts you're going to make in the next 3 years. Don't hide behind this waffle of a statement, a waffle of a paragraph, which actually says nothing. It doesn't mean nothing to people out there, and it doesn't mean nothing to people in here. So if you're actually going to be honest, if you're going to propose cuts, which you are, because Councillor Coburn Price has said let's simplify, for example, cemeteries. Well, what does simplify mean? Can you expand what simplify means? Because, as I said, Councillor, we proposed an increase in cemetery fees, and Councillor Coburn-Price, in a roundabout way, and that's the way that I interpreted it, agreed with that, and that's the way that the Conservatives will be going forward. But the fact is, Mr Mayor, that the Conservative manifesto tonight is pay more, get nothing, or pay more, get less in services, and we're going to what other Conservative councils across the country have been doing for a number of years, that you go into the Ryanair service, that you get a very basic level of service, and if you want anything extra, you pay for it. But I'm very, very disappointed in the Conservative group and the leader of the council in not being honest with the people of Pendle tonight in terms of £500,000 worth of savings in 1 year. What's the 3-year strategy? What's the savings in 3 years? Will there be £8 million worth of savings? If they are, be honest and share with us tonight what the strategy is for 3 years. Not tell us what you're going to do next, well, not even tell us what you're going to do next year, because nobody seems to know, not even your own group seems to know what you're proposing next year. But when he sums up, I would challenge him, publicly challenge him, Mr Mayor, if he's got a 3-year strategy, as Councillor Coburn-Price keeps harping on about, let the leader share with me and other councillors and the people of Pendle what cuts he's making in the next 3 years and how he's going to achieve those savings. Let's see what bold measures he's got, or is he going to hide behind this element of, well, let's look at £500,000 next year, but we don't actually know, it's a stab in the dark. And the next 2 years after that, we're not actually showing our hand. Well, I'll tell him what he's going to do. He's going to do £500,000 worth of cuts next year, and know that cuts after cuts after cuts for the next 2 and 3 years. It's about time you stood up to Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak and fought for this borough and actually said, because he said at the beginning, lobbying is easy. He's actually done absolutely no lobbying since he's become leader, Mr Mayor. I've challenged him at previous council meetings, and he's not bought any additional funding to plug the gap over the last 10 years. He should hang his head in shame, and let's be honest with the people, Councillor Ahmed. What cuts are you proposing for years 2 and 3?
Before you sign any more speakers, you have to respond to that.
I'll say a few things. A 3-year transformation plan.
What? Tell us.
The transformation plan is being developed. Rather than lurching, sticking plasters, 1 year to the next, you lurch a decision, quick saving here, quick saving there. You've got to look at the whole thing. You've been the leader in the past. You know what's involved in that. And doing anything short term, making it up like that. I said in my speech there was a long list of statutory, discretionary and fixed costs. There are a lot of options, there are a lot of delivery methods that the council is looking at in terms of how Liberator works, how environmental services works, how the Leisure Trust works. Everything like that is up for review as part of the transformational plan.
Councillor Whipp.
Mr Mayor, I just wanted to say that I'm grateful for Councillor David Coburn-Price confirming that you are indeed kicking the can down the road. This is the worst example of fantasy financing that I have seen at Pendle Council in my 40+ year history here. Councillor Ahmed, leader of the council, commenting on our budget, said, quote, "We can't just say we are going to save £600,000. Well, what does the Conservative group budget say? Well, we are going to save £500,000. The statement is equally valid.
Yes.
This is a vacuous fantasy financing proposal that hides behind a magic wand that might not even work. Mr Mayor, it should be thrown out, but I recognise that you've got the majority, unfortunately.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Just addressing the point Councillor Whipp has made, stating that the same equally applies to our budget proposals. No, it doesn't. The Liberator contract is a legal contract which we have no control over directly, and it's a legally binding contract, as I will repeat myself, and we cannot simply dictate to them other than discussing and negotiating with them as we have done in the past. And the Council knows this full well. We cannot simply say, there's going to be a reduction of £600,000. That cannot happen. Discussions will take place and are continuing as we speak, and we might make some savings, but you cannot put in a budget proposal and say, and then compare that to our proposal, which are looking at things which this council can directly control and we can make the decision on. Whereas with a rate contract, we cannot make that decision. So there is a clear distinction between the two. To suggest that they are one and the same, they are not. In terms of just addressing Councillor Iqbal's point about being honest, we have tried to be honest. We are clearly saying the budget, the council is in financial difficulties. We all accept, all groups accept that. So we are being truthful, and I'm being truthful by saying we cannot simply address all these problems in 1 year. That cannot happen. So it would be foolish, and I'll be lying to the public if I stood here and said, yes, we are going to do X, Y, and Z. This is a transformation programme. If it was that easy, Councillor Iqbal, been leader for many years, would have tackled these issues. So I'm not going to take a lecture from Councillor Iqbal about budget and financial prudence. In terms of raising reserves of over £1 million, and if you will look at Councillor Iqbal, then reserves will be gone in a few years. So to suggest that our budget, which is financially prudent, which will plus, and I do genuinely believe it is deliverable, but it will take time, being honest. We're not going to be able to, we haven't got a magic wand, and nobody has, but at least we are trying to do something different. We're trying to do this transformation programme, which Councillor Iqbal supported and voted with us and said, yes, let's invest this £250,000.
Point of personal explanation, Mr. Mayor. I did not support £500,000 worth of cuts as transformation. You need to correct the record.
No, there's no point of clarification. I said £250,000. No, I didn't say £500,000. I said £250,000. Where did you get £500,000? I didn't mention that figure. I didn't mention that figure though. I'm not talking about that.
Calm down.
No, I'm calm, but he's making a point of order when there is none.
I never made a point of order.
Honestly.
You're a point of order.
So it's £250,000 transformation, which was supported by the Labour group. Stand here and try to deny and say we've got nothing to do with it. And we've been clear and transparent. There will be regular updates. We will work with the other groups. If Council Bell wants to be part of this process, by all means, we want to be working together because we've got difficulties and we owe this to our residents. The last thing people want to hear is us arguing over budgets and financial, when people are suffering so much. Let's work together on the budget and the difficulties this council is facing. Because if we just continue to do what's happened over the years, don't get me wrong, we're not trying to say people have to make easy decisions. There have been difficult decisions all along by all groups, but we still haven't solved the problem. We still haven't been able to balance the books, and that's the problem. And that's what we're trying to achieve and say, look, let's make this council sustainable in the long term. So I'm proud of the budget that we are proposing. I'll repeat, it's robust, financially prudent and deliverable. Thank you.
You all have a copy of this. We'll vote on this. It's not a name vote. Resolution on the robustness of the budget, estimates and additional reserves. Mr. vote. Okay, all those in favour?
Mr. Mayor, we're not voting on the...
We are after this.
All right.
So all those in favour? Keep your hands up, please, and then the count. Thank you. No, that passed. Sorry.
You taken against?
My apologies.
Mr. Mayor, I exercise my right to have my vote recorded against the robustness of the budget estimates.
Sir, no vote will be recorded. Thank you, sir. So, the motion passed. We're now going to vote on the original motion. Thank you. This is recorded.
We need to have separate votes on the general, on the revenue fund, on the capital programme and on the council tax resolution. The first one is the general fund. And it's the motion as originally moved by councillor
Against.
Councillor Ahmed.
For.
Councillor Lee.
For.
Councillor Anwar.
Against.
Councillor Ashcraft.
Against.
Councillor Aslan.
For.
Councillor Butler. Councillor Carroll.
For.
Councillor David Colburn-Price.
For.
Councillor Sarah Colburn-Price.
For.
Councillor Dewthorpe.
For.
Councillor Harrison.
For.
Councillor Anee.
Against.
Councillor Howard.
For.
Councillor Mohammed Iqbal.
Against.
Councillor Yasser Iqbal.
Against.
Councillor Lockwood. Councillor Leonti.
For.
Councillor Lord.
Against.
Councillor McGladdery. For. Councillor McGowan.
For.
Councillor Mahmood.
Against.
Councillor Newman.
Against.
Councillor Cassell.
For.
Councillor Saqib. Councillor Sutcliffe.
For.
Councillor David Whipp.
Against.
Councillor Tomley.
Against.
For, those against, motion carried. The next vote.
Next vote on the back of the programme. Councillor Asman.
For.
Councillor Ahmed.
Abstain.
Councillor Ahmed. For. Councillor Aldrin. For. Councillor Anwar. Councillor
Oh,
Anwar.
sorry. Abstain.
Councillor Ashcraft.
Abstain.
Councillor Aslan.
For.
Councillor Butler. For. Councillor Carroll.
For.
Councillor David Colburn-Price.
For.
Councillor Sarah Colburn-Price.
For.
Councillor Dewthorpe.
For.
Councillor Harrison.
For.
Councillor Anee.
Abstain.
Councillor Howard.
For.
Councillor Mohammed Iqbal.
Abstain.
Councillor Yasser Iqbal.
Abstain.
Councillor Lockwood. Councillor Leonti.
For.
Councillor Lord.
Against.
Councillor McGladdery. Councillor McGowan.
For.
Councillor Mahmood.
Abstain.
Councillor Newman.
Against.
Councillor Cassell.
For.
Councillor Saqib. Councillor Sutcliffe.
For.
Councillor David Whipp.
Against.
Councillor Tomley.
Against.
Last one is on the council resolution. Councillor Adnan.
For.
Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Aldrin.
For.
Councillor Anwar.
For.
Councillor Ashcraft. Councillor Aslan.
For.
Councillor Butler. Councillor Carroll. Councillor David Colburn-Price. Councillor Sarah Colburn-Price. Councillor Dewthorpe.
For.
Councillor Harrison. Councillor Anee. Councillor Howard.
For.
Councillor Mohammed Iqbal.
For.
Councillor Yasser Iqbal. Councillor Lockwood. Councillor Leonti. Councillor Lord.
Against.
Councillor McGladdery. For. Councillor McGowan. Councillor Mahmood.
For.
Councillor Newman.
Against.
Councillor Cassell.
For.
Councillor Saqib. Councillor Sutcliffe. Councillor David Whipp.
Against.
Councillor Tomley.
Against.
For again, motion carried. Thank you. Okay, item 8. Hotel report of the council tax scheme 2022-23.
Mr. Mayor, I need this.
Report in blue. Second, please. David Colburn-Price. All those in favour? Thank you. Number item 9. notice of motion. Cost of living crisis. Mr. Whipp.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The resolution reads that Council notes the 54% increase in domestic energy prices added to the big increase in the cost of food and basic household goods means that households in Pendle are faced with a cost of living crisis. Council also notes that the response to the crisis from government is inadequate. Therefore, Council resolved to call on the Prime Minister to take effective steps to address the crisis and instructs the Chief Executive to write to the PM accordingly. Mr Mayor, on top of the swinging 54% increases in energy costs, we have national insurance contributions going up, where working people will be hard hit in their pay packets. We have inflation, which is set to hit over 7% within a few weeks, when pensions and benefits are only going to go up by 3.1%. And in terms of the pensions, there should of course have been the triple lock, which would have guaranteed a pensions increase of 8%, and that increase is going to be less than half of that, and much less than the rate of inflation. There's an income tax allowance freeze, which will hit people in the pockets, and there's a student loan stealth tax, and we've seen announced today the further measures that are proposed, which will make it even harder for students to make ends meet in the future. And then, of course, and very regrettably, with the invasion of Ukraine, we have seen petrol costs, fuel costs, going through the roof as well. So this crisis is leading to a cost of living crunch. The cumulative effects will be seeing people in Pendle hard hit and driven to the poverty line because of what is happening. Now, a lot of these factors are outside the government's control. Wholesale gas prices, which have gone up by 50% today, the wholesale markets, aren't within the government's control. But what the government could do, they could take a leaf out of the French government's book and actually redistribute some of the obscene profits that the energy companies are now making. And when you see profit of £9.7 billion because of the windfall that those companies are getting due to the high oil and gas prices, you've got to question if the priorities are correct. Mr Mayor, the government could be holding the energy costs down to a reasonable level, as is happening in France. The government could have cancelled the national insurance increases. The government could have increased pensions so that they properly reflected the triple lot, and they could do away with the income tax freeze and their proposals for student loans. There are lots of things that the government could do should they choose to do so. But we are seeing none of that. We are seeing Rishi Sunak, billionaire himself, giving us every household a £200 loan, whether we like it or not, to be repaid on demand. So we're not going to be no better off there. And there's going to be a one-off £150 rebate on council tax, which will very cleverly hide the swinging increases that this council has just voted through. But a long-term, sustainable way for people in Pendle, one of the poorest parts of the country in many places, to actually get by and have household incomes that stack up and make it affordable to heat your home and eat off your kitchen table lacking. So, Mr Mayor, I move this motion. I hope that we will send a letter, get in touch with the Prime Minister, and hopefully he won't be partying, he'll be paying attention, and he would actually, he and his government, do something sensible to make the cost of living bearable here in Pendle. Thank you very much. I move.
I second that, Mr Mayor. Can I speak now? Yeah. Thank you. Coming right down close to home and referring to my own ward, Waterside, where we have quite a lot of poverty, but also I do believe throughout Pendle, in the more affluent areas, there'll be poverty. There'll be poverty behind people's closed doors, in Fence, in Higham, in Barrowford, in Troughton, that we don't know about, but it will be happening because of what's gone on with the COVID and one thing and another. And the other thing I was thinking about was, it's just gone out of my head now. Ukraine. I'm amazed that it hasn't been mentioned tonight. It is something to do with us because it's going to affect us if it carries on. I know we're only listening to the first day, but it's happened. There's been an invasion. We may become involved, you know, with our military. So it is, and I have to say, I didn't want to say this, but our group asked for an emergency motion on this, and it was rejected because it's nothing to do with us. But we're already seeing the effects of the petrol prices, the gas, the food prices. It will affect us, but that is a wider thing. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of things going on where people are really, really struggling in Pendle. I live on my own, and I've found myself turning my heating down in the middle of winter. I don't really need to, but I'm becoming a little bit frightened of how these costs are going to soar. How many other people that haven't got anything, I'm okay. People that haven't got anything at all, they must be absolutely frantic with everything that's going on in Pendle, in the world, in the government. It's just terrifying, I think. Absolutely terrifying. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one thing, people, if somebody's talking, and you know, okay, they want to speak on this?
Mr Mayor, I was quite dismayed when you rejected my emergency motion for Ukraine. I'm sure every member here is well aware of what's happening in Eastern Europe today. Russia invaded Ukraine in the early hours of the morning. And it's a very sad time indeed for Europe. I put in an emergency motion to show this council support to central government.
We have, assuming councillor, we have decided not to bring that to the forefront.
Right, but
I would like to talk about this because it is directly important to the cost of living crisis.
Yes,
Just one moment. Please calm down. Take your back. Look back.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to continue.
To let me speak, Eagle. Thank you. Yes, you want to let me speak on it, sir? Want to let me speak on it, sir?
Sorry?
Speak on it, and I want to let you speak on it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'll continue after that interruption. The effects that the conflict in Ukraine will have on this country are going to be great and severe. The sanctions that we are imposing on Russia, which I think as a country we are very right to do so, will, and already have, an immediate impact on the cost of gas and energy security for the United Kingdom. We are reliant on gas to fund our electric grid, and surprise, surprise, the electric grid does include Pendle. We've failed as a country to put in the nuclear power, other renewables we've desperately needed over the last decades. And the energy security that comes from losing the gas from Russia will hit us hard in the coming years. I think that's why it's so much more important that we do see effective action from the government to properly tax energy companies to provide a windfall for households. $11 billion profits from BP, I believe. 11 billion. That is a number which no one here can fathom. It's so out of this world, and it comes after the pandemic where billionaires across the world increased their net wealth collectively by trillions of pounds. Trillions. It's coming to a breaking point very soon where it'll be unaffordable for people to live in this country. It already is for millions, but there's more people in the working class who, because of these increases, will fall into that category. And that's very sad to see. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm very supportive of this motion. I think considerable action needs to be taken from government. They haven't addressed it enough. Yeah, and I'm very sad that my emergency motion wasn't put in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There is an amendment.
Of course.
Just a clarification we have. I was advised that the motion must be about matters of which the council have responsibility or affect the borough of Pendle. That was my advice. Okay, please.
I'd like to move an amendment. I certainly acknowledge that we live at a time.
Excuse me, sir. I do apologise. When the council speaking, you don't. Thank you.
Thank you. We live at a time of terrible volatility that Councillor Whipp rightly noted is not, with so many international things from COVID to the war in Ukraine to the energy crisis, that outside this government's control. In fact, it was only about a year ago that many energy companies went to the wall and prices at the petrol pumps were historically low. And yet today, we are over $100 a barrel for oil. So this government has, throughout this time, worked incredibly hard to level up. This area has received £31.5 million at the peer review that sadly none of the opposition councillors came to attend. We heard here that they said, my goodness, we wish our areas had had this level of support. We're so jealous, said the man from East Cheshire. So we see that the government has done already a lot for Pendle, and I don't have the stats, but perhaps Richard Gibson does, of the vast sums of money of support that have been handed out to households and to businesses, because without handing out grants to businesses during the difficult time we've had, people would have lost their jobs, and they haven't lost their jobs. So I think we have to be very grateful. So the motion reads, the Council notes and regrets the large increases in domestic energy prices at the same time as other household bills rise, and with the increased political instability in Eastern Europe creating further economic uncertainty. The Council notes help from Cosy Homes in Lancashire until June this year, whereby energy efficiency improvements can be made to homes for free, including loft insulation, cavity wall insulation. Obviously that doesn't help with a solid stone house, I can tell you. Central heating, replacement boilers. The Council also notes the Warm Home Discount Scheme, which could provide a £140 discount on household electricity. The Council also notes the Domestic Renewable Heat Initiative, which provides grants towards renewable heating costs, including biomass boilers, solar water heating, and certain types of heat pumps. Under this scheme, payments are made for 7 years and are based on the amount of renewable heat generated. The Council also notes the Household Support Fund, which provides grants to families and households who need help to pay for food, gas and electric bills this winter. The scheme is open until the 31st of March and is being run for Pendle Council by Burnley, Pendle and Rossendale CPS. The Council also notes the forthcoming energy bills rebate worth £150 for all households in council tax bands A to D. So that's actually a lot of schemes. No? I don't know what Mr. Beesdale is saying. The Council resolves to promote more fully the extra help that is available with domestic energy and other household costs, so that all Pendle residents who qualify can take full advantage of these schemes.
Okay, any seconder?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to second that.
Would you like to say?
Nothing.
Mr Mayor, my group will be voting against the amendment because, as Councillor Corbyn Price has outlined, if you look on the internet, and I've just done a quick research, in terms of most of these schemes that she's alluded to, all tend to end within the next few weeks. Some end in March, some end in June. If Conservative colleagues think that the energy crisis will end on the 31st of March, well, clearly we're living in cloud cuckoo land, because, as Councillor Tom Whipp has alluded to, that if the Ukraine crisis continues for a number of weeks, people in Pendle, Mr Mayor, those that live in properties above Band D, will actually be in worse poverty than some of those that live in Band A, because, as Councillor Dorothy Lord alluded to earlier, that there is a lot of poverty in some of the affluent areas of this borough, but because they're in bands D, E, F, G and H in some cases, they don't qualify for any of this help. And in terms of the Warm Home Discount Scheme, that only is available to people that are either on pension credit or on the broader group as identified by their utility supplier. That precludes a lot of people who are in fuel poverty, Mr Mayor. And the fact is that the amendment really totally negates what the original motion was talking about. I actually asked the government to take a serious look at this. What the amendment does is seems to think that the crisis will finish in a few weeks, which you and I know, Mr Mayor, that's certainly not going to be the case, because when people receive their winter bills for their winter fuel, they're not going to be receiving them on the 31st of March and paying them on the 1st of April. They will actually, some of them will be paying them for years to come because of the significant increase in energy prices. So I would urge colleagues not to support the amendment and support the original motion.
Thank you. I'll just bring Tom to the top.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This amendment, it doesn't apply to Pendle at all, really. The majority of housing stock in Pendle is not eligible for heat pumps, not eligible for solar water heating, not eligible for cavity wall, as you said yourself. It's entirely out of whack with what the majority of people in Pendle live in. It's been a problem for a long time. The support to insulate homes has been lacking for a long time now, and we saw with the Heat Britain, what was it? Not Heat Britain. Insulate Britain protests, how much of an issue it is for some people, and the government largely ignored it. Hid it away, it's not a problem, we'll make it illegal to protest. So, although Sarah Corbyn-Price might be living in a house that's eligible for some of these schemes, I think a lot of her constituents are not going to be. I know a lot of my constituents aren't going to be. As I said, the majority of Pendle, this doesn't matter to them because they can't apply for them in the first place. It's therefore that I can't support this amendment at all. It doesn't apply to Pendle. It's entirely out of whack and reality with what, even, you know, leaving out the deadlines which are ending soon, it wouldn't help anyone, and it doesn't.
Thank you.
Obviously it does help lots of people, otherwise these schemes wouldn't exist, and a lot of people will find that there is applicability within these many schemes, which are the schemes that are available now. I cannot predict the future. Several times this evening we've been asked to predict the future, what will be in the budget next year or the year after that. We don't have amazing mystical powers, but these are the schemes that are available now. Most of them are applicable to many people in Pendle, and we don't know what schemes may be available from the summer onwards, but I would imagine that with the crisis affecting this country that's so serious, and globally, that the government will be extremely excited to try and find some solutions to help its populace, just like it did in COVID.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Warm words from Councillor Sarah Coburn-Price. Very warm words, but completely disingenuous. Mr. Mayor, the original motion was about the cost of living crisis. And this is an issue that isn't just going to affect the poorest amongst us. It's going to affect households that have been reasonably well off, but are going to be hard hit by a series of different things, including energy costs, which are going to hit them badly in the pocket and tip them into financial uncertainty that they have not previously had. Now, there has been some mention of the effects of COVID. Some people, I'm not saying these are necessarily the richest people, but mostly the case, have done very well from COVID, and Councillor Tom Whipp referred to the people who have done extremely well indeed, which tends to be cronies of government ministers and the billionaires who've actually creamed it in. Now, there aren't many of those in Pendle, but there are people who, because of furlough payments and the like, have been okay, and they've not been spending to the same extent. So they've built up savings. But there are so many more people who have been badly affected and are now due to be even more badly affected because of these direct increases in the costs that they cannot control. And of course the 54% increase in domestic energy prices comes in from 1st of April, but we're looking at another price cap increase in October. And just look at what has happened to the wholesale gas prices, today alone, they have gone up by 50%. So what on earth is coming down the road? I hate to think, and I'm not going to get my crystal ball out and speculate, but it's not going to be good news. Councillor Sarah Coburn-Price says the government have already done a lot for Pendle. Well, what would be the harm in actually asking the government to take note of what is happening and actually calling on them to take more effective steps? Of the list of things that Councillor Coburn-Price sets out as well, all this wonderful thing is happening. Cosley Homes in Lancashire, my understanding is that the programme was extended to June, but there wasn't any extra cash, and that indeed they were oversubscribed and unable to accommodate any more programmes. In terms of domestic renewable heat initiative, you're talking about an investment of tens of thousands of pounds, even if your property qualifies for that. And as has been pointed out, the Household Support Fund expires on the 31st of March. So the day before the 54% cap is increased for energy costs. So, Mr Mayor, it really does beg a belief that the Conservatives aren't wanting the council to take any positive action, but we just get a list of things that don't really apply to most people. They're not eligible, they're not rich enough, or it just doesn't help. And I think that sums it up really, isn't it? The Conservatives just don't help.
Councillor, put a vote on the amendment first. All those in favour? All those against? All and against motion. The amendment side. Okay, did you come to the vote? You want to have? So we're going to vote on the original motion? Okay. The amendment is now the motion. And we'll look to vote on that. Yes. All in favour? All against? Item 9.3, infrastructure and renewal. Councillor Brandon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before I start, I'd just like to thank Council Ward, including friends, in their austerity speech. Thank you. Right, the Council notes that the county deal bid recently submitted and the Levelling Up Fund awarded to Pendle's area falls short of resources previously available for the European and central government funding for local government, which has been severely cut over a decade, which has more of austerity. Council also notes that the government recent announcement on Levelling Up offers little prospect for significant improvement for the people of Pendle, and that no new funding has been identified for disadvantaged areas such as ours. Council resolves that the Chief Executive writes to the Prime Minister and Andrew Stevenson, RMP, requesting that a real transfer of resources to be placed in Pendle in order to achieve the levelling up of the county. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The levelling up funding, I say promised by government. They've always been very vague about what levelling up actually means. Represents, to me, a failure to level up the north of England. We've seen a water down of rail infrastructure plans, which we've talked about here before, and I won't go into again, but it just represents a lack of funding which has been prevalent for the last decade under austerity, and a lack of commitment to replace those funds stolen from Pendle in the coming years. Mr. Mayor, the European Union put a lot of money into the northwest of England through grants. This levelling up bid doesn't even cover what's lost from leaving the European Union from that. So much the NHS saving so much from European membership fees. It looks to me like the benefit of Brexit really has been a reduction in money available for places like Pendle, which I think we could have all predicted. I second this motion by Councillor Brian Newman, and hope you will be in favour of it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else speak on it? Is there an amendment there?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You'll see my amendments in front of you, and I feel that we are lucky and privileged to welcome the funding we have received in Pendle so far, and I look forward to working with colleagues to create innovative bids for further funding. It is also worth noting that LCC funding pots have been made available in last week's budget to support the levelling up funding bids across the county. It's very encouraging. And Councillor Whipp said he didn't really know what levelling up meant for our county and for the northwest of England. It means £31.5 million injected into the borough. I think the fact that's very encouraging. I move this amendment.
Councillor Sutcliffe says it means we get £31.5 million. Has Councillor Sutcliffe added up how much money Pendle Council has lost in the last 10 years since 2010? Because it's a heck of a lot more than £31.5 million. In fact, I think you could probably put a zero on the end of it and you'd be looking at the fact that we've lost 10 times that amount. And, you know, to come along with this wishy-washy amendment that says, oh, well, what full job, you know, everybody's doing. Well, come on, get real. Have a look at what's actually happening in Pendle. Look at the regeneration that needs carrying out. And just acknowledge that the resources, the crumbs that have come from this government are a fraction of what is needed to really address the problems that there are in this borough. I just despair that, and I won't call the Conservative councillors lackeys, but that was the first word that came into my mind. This Conservative group on Pendle Council are so beholden to the Prime Minister and Andrew Stevenson, they cannot say a word against them, and they cannot actually bestir themselves to lobby to actually get the resources that people in Pendle actually deserve and rightly demand.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I mean, Councillor Ash Sutcliffe stands where one of his former friends, I assume at the moment, Christian Wakeford, used to stand at one time. And be the lackey for Andrew Stevenson and sing his praises. And obviously, since Christian used to do that, we've had a number of other friends of Councillor Sutcliffe, including ex-Councillor Wakeford, take that cheerleader role up, and he's more recently now taken it up as of tonight. But I would have thought, as part of his amendment, that starts off, welcomes the 31.5 million that's been secured for Pendle, making us the envy of many boroughs. He would have listed and shared with us which were the at least one other borough who publicly come out and said that they're envious of what's happening in Pendle. The fact is, Mr Mayor, and Councillor Whipp has highlighted it, that Andrew Stevenson has not once voted against his government. He is party, I suppose party is the wrong word, but he is an aiding and abetting the cuts that have been imposed on this borough, that have made many millions of pounds of cuts to this borough. He also has voted time and time again, and clearly the cheerleader forgets to mention that tonight, in terms of the misery that he's heaped on Pendle residents. We've already discussed that in terms of the cost of living crisis earlier. So I'm not surprised that Councillor Sutcliffe stands tonight to thank Andrew Stevenson, because obviously Andrew thanks Ash on a regular basis, but maybe history will repeat itself in 2 or 3 years' time when Ash maybe converts to the actual rail side and stands up and says Andrew was a waste of time.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There is a lot of work to be done here in Pendle, no doubt whatsoever. But I think the negativity that we hear is unbelievable. We have £25 million for Nelson. We've got £25 million for Nelson and £6.5 million for Cole. I would say that's a pretty good start in a short period of time. And to say we will sing to Andrew Stevenson or Boris Johnson, end of the day we are elected to represent Pendle. And me personally, I can put some record, I personally lobbied Andrew Stevenson and other ministers and pleaded and said, look, this funding for Nelson and for Corn is needed. And to say that there was no input from our MP, I think if we want to move forward and progress as a council, we need to build relationships. It's not a case of we've been having in the past where councillors stand and bad word there, but anyway, we can't to say things about our MP at the government and put this on record and put it on social media constantly, and then right to these same people say to Andrew, oh, come down and meet with this. That's not how the real world works. You have to build relationships with people. There's give and take. And I'll put this on record, I'm not ashamed to say this. I've sat down with Andrew and said, look, we want this funding here for Nelson, we want this funding for Pendle, and please do what you can from your side. And I'm assured, and Andrew Stevenson does work as much as he possibly can for Pendle. That's not to say there isn't any criticism. Of course, there's always. I'll keep on demanding more funding. And previous councillor Carl mentioned I haven't lobbied since I've been the leader of the council. Of course I haven't. It's on record through the council. It's been minuted. And I've done this in my own personal capacity as well as leader in my own time, and had meetings with our MP and the MPs from the government to say that we as an administration are not doing this is not true at all. And the levelling up fund and other funding bits need to go in, and we need to continue to work, and there is more funding out there, and we will continue to work with all partners in a sensible way rather than the political manner which we're hearing from the other group leaders. And I don't think that's the right approach. We need to change our approach, be more positive, be more proactive, and and less work with the county council, less work with our MP, and less work with the government.
So, we have 2 more speakers, and then we have the right to reply. So, Councillor Tomway, you go first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Leader of the Council says the negativity that he hears is unbelievable. I find it very believable, Mr. Mayor. Over the last decade, we've seen many cuts to this council and councils across England. It's devastating, really, that austerity has led to early deaths throughout the United Kingdom in the tens of thousands. And that negativity there is unbelievable to him, I think, is quite unreal, really. He says he'll keep on demanding. Mr. Mayor, this council hasn't demanded anything of the government through motions to council since it took office. In fact, the only thing they've demanded is a thank you for thanking Andrew Stevenson. It's hard to believe that you're leading a council when you've only tabled 1 notice of motion the entire time that you've had a majority. 1. Putting amendments through doesn't count. You know, that's not leading, that's just copying and tidying up the perceived mess. I just think it's utterly wrong. And I won't be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just a quick question for the leader. He's just obviously been saying, he's personally been... Sorry, it's a comment that obviously I've heard the leader say that he's lobbied Andrew Stevenson personally and everything for for Nelson and Corn, which you have said, haven't you? What about Briarfield and Reedley? Do you not cover Briarfield and Reedley? Did you speak to Andrew about Briarfield for more investment? Can I finish, please? Yeah. You know, that's what I've heard from you all night, Briarfield, Corn and Nelson.
He's finished.
I've finished, thank you.
Thank you. Let's just reiterate it. When the council is speaking, you don't. Just be polite to everybody, please. Thank you. Okay, any more speakers? Good.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a really brief comment about lobbying. It's how do you think we got £31.5 million in the first place? We constantly work with our colleagues. We constantly have these conversations to make sure these funding comes to our area. And it's something that is there. We want to continue to do so. We speak to all of the relevant people we can to make sure that we get as much money for our area as possible. You mentioned Christine Wakeford. He's no friend of mine. I'm just a near friend of Dorothy. What can I say?
Councillor Newman, you have a right to reply. Councillor Sorry? You want to reply?
No, thank you.
So, we're going to vote on the amendment.
No, that one.
All right.
Okay, let's get back to business. It's getting late. We're to vote on the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment? All those against? For and against. It now becomes a substantial motion. All those in favour? All those against? It is carried. We're now moving on to item 9C. Public space protection order enforcement. And this is Councillor David.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to begin by presenting this petition to you, which is signed by several hundred people. And this is about PSPO enforcement and operation. And it's from residents, dog walkers in Bunalswick, and it specifically refers to Bunalswick. But the issues are such that they actually transcend the whole of Pendle. So I wonder, Mr Mayor, if this could be received by yourself.
Received, we're grateful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr Mayor, the motion reads that Council notes with concern persistent problems with the enforcement of public space protection orders covering dogs in parks and the inappropriate actions of enforcement officers. Accordingly, Council resolved to review the contract for the provision of enforcement services and request the Policy and Resources Committee to carry out such a review at the earliest opportunity. Mr Mayor, all members of the Council will be aware that several people, many people, have emailed about the activities of district enforcement and the way in which they operate. And people will be aware of the horrendous examples of inappropriate action by this private enforcement company in pursuit of profit. The examples include following a lone lady, and in one case following her for several hundred yards, perhaps not quite half a mile, and confronting her in a ginnel. Something that you might think is questionable in any circumstances when two male people confront a lone woman in a ginnel. Examples of operatives reducing women to tears. One lady, Mr Mayor, sank to the ground on a rugby pitch with a panic attack and was harangued by two operatives for around 15 minutes. Mr Mayor, these operatives are preying on the vulnerable. They are exploiting technical infringements, and they are targeting entirely the wrong sort of people. They're effectively demanding money with menaces, and they are failing to address dog fouling. 2 years ago, this council failed to sack district enforcement following a previous call for review from myself and colleagues, and instead voted to renew the contract, and not only renew it, but extend the contract. And I'll read the words that were agreed. To extend the scope of the contract to include public space protection order requirements, such as dogs on leads, increase the weekly sessions in parks and other green spaces, concentrate on PSPOs. So, Mr Mayor, 2 years ago, the contract was renewed, explicitly saying target PSPOs, target dog walkers, and that is exactly what is happening. We had a period of quiet during the pandemic, but now that those furlough people are back, they are hitting law-abiding dog walkers and really making a mockery of this council, failing to encourage people to use parks, and not doing a single thing to actually reduce dog fouling, which is the problem that we're all confronted by. And at my request, there's information been provided, which you will see 69% of people issued with FBNs are female, underlining the fact that it's females that they're targeting.
Thank you. Just a reminder, in the middle of song, thank you. There is an amendment.
Mr. Martin seconded, yeah?
No, it's not late, Mr. Mayor.
You've got to second it.
This notice of motion needs to be seconded before we move on to any amendments. Mr. Mayor, I'm seconding this because Councillor Adams couldn't be here tonight. The contractors carrying out these fines are bringing this council into disrepute. When people are harassed and people are unduly fined, they don't blame an unknown private entity, they blame this council. Continuing with this contract puts reputational damage against Pendle Council. Mr. Mayor, I've heard stories about people being harassed, and it is horrific. No one should feel threatened when entering one of our parks. I think Councillor Whipp's point about that previous motion does outline why we're having such an acute problem in West Craven, where one of our major parks is full of sports pitches, and sports pitches are dogs on leads only. We're the only place in Pendle that has a large park that is majoritively sports pitches, and so even though Holt House and other parks in the borough that are sport pitches see the same restrictions, they do not see the same enforcement action taken by district enforcement. It was at the previous Policy and Resources Committee that the council or the committee agreed to review West Craven in its own for PSPOs, but this notice of motion is about a contract with district enforcement who are no longer fit for purpose and never were in the first place. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will second, and let's hear the amendment.
Thank you. What you should say that is an amendment.
St Andrew Stevenson. That's right.
signage for PSPO orders is inadequate. The mechanism already exists for public challenge where signage is deemed inadequate, and as a result, one location has already been highlighted. Council resolves to urgently ask our Environmental Services Manager to carry out a comprehensive review of all signage where PSPOs are in place. The district enforcement contract and the terms of operation are subject to periodic review, and this will take place in due course. That will be my motion. An additional comment from my perspective, Mr. Mayor, is that I share the concern of the various emails that we receive from residents, but I do feel that this issue needs to be put into perspective. I'd like to thank the officers for the very late submission of some statistical data which was provided by email. The councils have received them at around 5:45 this evening. And what that showed was from April 21 up until February's data this month, out of 1,451 PSPOs, fixed penalty notices issued in that period, just 1.7% of those, or 24, were related to dogs at all. That was a mixture of dogs on leads and dogs fouling. So 1.7% yet. Councillor Whipp's motion talks about a persistent problem. Statistically, it isn't a persistent problem.
I would also like to remind colleagues that there are various reporting mechanisms available, and complaints can be easily verified. These officers that issue these fines all have on board CCTV. Councils have the ability to visit Fleet Street, request the footage and view them. Councils that I've spoken to, the officers that I've spoken to, haven't found any issues with the reports that have come in and the CCTV that have been reviewed. Hasn't been a single verified issue there. I'd like to actually ask if I were to be able to ask councils to put the hand up with how many issues they're verified on CCTV. I think it will be very few. So I'm not saying that I'm not concerned at all by these reports. Some of them are quite shocking to read. However, I think we need to maybe publicise that these complaints can be very, very easily verified. As I've just explained, it is a persistent problem that we've got. Less than 2% that are dog related at all. I think 98% aren't. Can't do the maths there. So I do move the motions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have a second for that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll second it. Okay. Could I speak now?
Yeah.
Thank you. It's worth noting that the public space protection orders were renewed in January. They've been in place for 3 years across the whole of Pendle. And there was a fairly late information coming out, but it went round all the area committees, came out beginning of January and had to be completed by the end. A number of parish and town councils commented and made changes. So the restrictions that people are complaining about have been there for some time. I think the biggest issue I found, particularly in recent times going around, particularly by knocking on the doorstep, was people were telling me, and I went and verified this as well, that the signage issues were very, very poor. In fact, there were many of our parks had more of an entrance to them, and in many instances they didn't have signs on them. I also found that the signage that was originally put up 3 years ago for a lot of these public space protection orders, particularly for the dogs and where they could go, and a lot of the parks have areas where they can be off the lead. They have to be on the lead in certain parts, as we've heard already. And actually gone. They'd been wiped out by the sun. There was nothing on them. A classic one is Suf Park. So there's a big issue there, whatever we say about the enforcement agency. A lot of our residents were not aware about the rules and where they were. So that's one of the reasons why I think it's absolutely vital, if you're going to hold residents responsible, and I won't comment on the wheres and wherefores of how that's being done, but if you're going to hold residents responsible, and I'm supporting 1 or 2, not to try and get them off the fine, because they didn't know what the rules were. The instructions aren't there on many of these entrances, and they should be repeated as well throughout the park in its area. It is vital. I will take my dog up to the park in Van Oswijk, Lecture Park. There's a big area there where you can let your dog off for it to roam through the grass and everything else. But you must have it on a lead when you get out of your car in the car park. Now, if somebody's not aware of those sort of basic instructions and you're trying to enforce it, then the two things don't work. So that's the reason I'm seconding this motion. We must get the signage right. And I'll just leave you with one thought. Dogs can't read.
No? Okay. Any more speakers? No. Sorry, Tom.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The phrase "not a persistent problem" was used there. Clearly, as is the case with the petition presented to the Vice Honourable Mayor, it is a persistent problem, enough so to have people feel so targeted that they need to start a petition to lobby councillors and to bring this issue to the forefront of minds. How can you say there's not a persistent problem when there are scores of constituents who are saying there is one? In lieu of body footage, we have investigated ourselves and found no wrongdoing comes to mind. Those cameras can be easily switched off. They can be covered up by a hand. I mean,
But they're not.
well,
I need to see.
Let the council speak.
yeah, I'd rather not be tested. Restrictions have been around for some time. Yeah, I agree. But a restriction that's not enforced is not really a restriction. You can't say, you know, oh, it's been there for 3 years, we haven't done anything about it, but this time, when you're least expecting it, we're going to get you. Because no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. It's that simple. Mr. Mayor, while I accept signage isn't great, and that is one of the key concerns that has been highlighted to me by lobbying constituents, that's not the key crux of the issue. It's just a side thing. I mean, this could have been dealt with through the area committee. In fact, I'm pretty sure it has been. We've asked for better signage. And so this amendment is null and void because it's already something being actioned. Mr. Mayor, this amendment completely takes away the entire thrust of the issue that is district enforcement. It's not the signs, it's not the fact that it's been there for 3 years and all the rest of it. It's profit-driven bullying. Mr. Mayor, this is just, no one should accept this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, just very quickly, in terms of district enforcement, I mean, there were concerns raised previously. We renewed the contract but made it clear to what we wanted them to do. I mean, I've had constituents approach me in the past where they've disputed what district enforcement have done, and I've had the opportunity to visit Fleet Street and view the CCTV cameras. I would say that 80% of the time it's been a case of the penalty notice was correct, but there have been occasions where, due to, for example, the type of weather that we've got tonight, the conversation that's taken place between the district enforcement officer and the constituent has not been heard properly, and there's been a dispute in terms of what's been said and how it's been said, and as a council we've then asked them to withdraw that particular notice, and they've obliged. But I think in terms of the amendment right at the end where it says the contract in terms of operation is subject to periodic review and this will take place in due course, I'm just wondering whether the move of the amendment will accept the last bit of Councillor David Whipp's motion where it says that they asked the Policy and Resources Committee to review it at the earliest opportunity. It makes sense rather than it leaving it open-ended on a periodic review, because when is the periodic review? If Councillor McLaren can help me, I'd be interested. But I just think if it's signposted to PNR at the earliest opportunity, that may take a couple of months, might take 3 or 4 months, but at least there's somewhere where it's going, and those people that have signed the petition then at least know that their petition is not being ignored completely.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, just in terms of the contract, it's due to be renewed in July this year. So there will be a report coming to Policy and Resources Committee to discuss this very issue at that time. But I'm just looking at the petition and the reasons given by residents, all legitimate reasons in the own right, strongly wrong. But most of the reasons given what look like the signed petition isn't really talking about the enforcement, it's talking about, for example, it says, aim of the petition is due to lack of transparent and meaningful consultation with all local authorities. It did go to the area committees and the town council had an opportunity to get involved in the consultation process. Lack of adequate designated space, green fences for off-the walking. Again, that was part of a discussion which had previously taken place. Inadequate signage, which we accept, and that's the amendment. And then it's talking about drop the tax, and then there is one section about enforcement agents. So I think it's a wide issue. What I think the motion is mainly looking at the enforcement
for absolute parity, you know, concerns that have been raised by residents. When you read them, they're quite concerning. You know, you picture yourself or your family members or your dear ones. It's not like very nice to read, so not pushing those to one side at all. Just like to reiterate, these can be investigated very easily. Councillors take the opportunity to visit Fleet Street and ask for the CCTV footage to do review yourself. You know, absolutely certain that if you did so, and one of these people was found to be acting inappropriately, they would be dealt with in the swiftest manner possible. Certainly the council. But the motion that we've seen does not evidence any issues at all. It's just worth so. Yeah, thank you, motion. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, do I take it that the mover of the amendment hasn't suggested the friendly suggestion from Councillor Iqbal?
Would you like to do what, sir?
Councillor Iqbal suggested that the final paragraph of your amendment be substituted for the final paragraph of the original motion. Are you accepting that?
Yeah, I think he is.
No, he said yes.
No, I think
okay. Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll give notice if this amendment is passed. I give notice of an amendment when it becomes a substantive motion. And this renewal in July, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. Councillor Goldthorpe said we must get the signage right. Well, I think there's a whole host of things that are wrong. The PSPOs themselves are wrong and need correcting. Whipp Town Council asked for them to be changed as part of the review that's just been carried out. That wasn't agreed in January, and I understand the limitations of time scale, but a further review is to be carried out for the parks in West Craven. Curiously, the Town Council in Earby wanted to extend restrictions, which I'll just say that I am underwhelmed by that suggestion. I think it's completely wrong-headed, but we'll come to that in due course. So the PSPOs themselves are wrong, they need changing, but the fundamental thrust of the proposal tonight, the original proposal, was to get district enforcement contract reviewed and, in my eyes, get them sacked because their actions and their attitudes are completely inappropriate, and as Councillor Tomlin pointed out, are bringing this council into disrepute. And not only that, but alienating a whole set of residents who are generally law-abiding, people who respect authority, and this just destroys that faith that people have, and it's time that we restored some faith in the services and systems that we have, and district enforcement to driving coach and horses through that. So, Mr. Mayor, I encourage people to vote against the amendment. I certainly hope that all the colleagues in West Craven, the two wards, will vote against this amendment because it is very much against what local residents want, and it's something that we really should make a stand here and now to say enough is enough and there must be change. But I do give notice of amendment if it does pass.
Thank you, Councillor. So we're now going to vote on the amendment. All those in favour? further amendments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to amend the resolution by adding a further 2 clauses. And the first one is Council Note 1, that in February 2020 the contract was extended for 12 months. Therefore, the term of the contract has now expired and should properly be terminated forthwith. And secondly, that the Parks PSPOs for West Craven are due to be reviewed following a decision of P&R in January, and that review should be undertaken immediately. So, Mr. Mayor, firstly, that decision in February 2020, when the contract with District Enforcement was extended for 12 months, 12 months, and extended to cover and prioritise PSPOs, dogs on leads and parks. That is the fundamental reason why we are having the problems that we are having. But 12 months expired in 2021. Therefore, there is no legitimacy, no legal basis for District Enforcement to be operated as agents of this council. And to say that the contract is to be renewed in July indicates that there is a willingness on the part of the controlling group to perpetuate an unlawful contract, unlawful agents, fining people in Pendle, taking hundreds of thousands of pounds out of local pockets, when that contract should be dead in the water. Now, Mr. Mayor, the leader of the council is a solicitor. What does he think about this council and their agents acting unlawfully? Isn't it time that we actually dealt honestly with people and accepted that District Enforcement are on a menace? They need blowing out of Pendle. We need to get rid of them now, and we should not forbear their persecution of local people for a day longer. They should be given the marching orders tomorrow following this meeting, and we shall have nothing further to do with them. Nothing whatsoever. So, Mr. Mayor, that's the first part. And then secondly, let's correct the mistakes that there are with the current public space protection orders. Get on with that review, as far as West Craven is concerned, with immediate effect. I move.
Second that, Mr. Mayor. I think it's also important that we do get to the bottom of this. We've outlined tonight many reasons why district enforcement aren't fit for purpose. I think that the move to privatise the enforcement of Pendle's PSPOs is just a move to hide behind a private company to say, not our problem, to avoid all thoughts of ownership of any issues it creates. That is entirely wrong. This council is entirely in charge of that. It's not obfuscated somewhere, and people should be accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Get on with it. So, does anybody want to speak on this?
Thank you. Just in terms of the contract itself, my understanding is there was no enforcement taking place due to COVID for some months. discuss further.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I'm just looking at the minutes for that February meeting where I was present, the leader of the council was present, and a number of the councillors in the room were present. And the minutes actually say that it was the appointment of district enforcement would agreed for a further 12 months, subject to the various agreement to include some proposals, and the report be brought back. I've taken on board what the leader's saying is that there's been no enforcement, but I mean, I'm no solicitor, he's a solicitor, we've got a barrister in the room as well. That there should have been some provision at some point in the past that said, look, the contract was extended for 12 months, but because there's been no enforcement, the council needs to extend, let the contract run its course for a further 12 months if need be. I've trawled through the minutes and I can't find anything there, so I stand to be corrected on that. Mr. Mayor, you had a petition presented to you tonight by council. I don't know how many signatories are on that petition, but normally council would refer that petition somewhere, would it not? And I assume the only place that would go to would be Policy and Resources Committee. So I'm just seeking your guidance as to where that petition and when it will go for further consideration. If your direction is that this council meeting presents it to the next meeting of Policy and Resources, then that's a clear direction for council officers, and I understand that they are stretched, to do some sort of report that picks up on what the concerns of the petitioners are. We can't simply just brush the petition under the carpet and say we're going to look at the contract in July, and in fact, should the contract be looked in July or should it be looked at ASAP, because the February 2020 minutes gave a clear direction. Take on board the advice that Mr Mosedale has given to the leader, but in law, and like I said, I'm no lawyer, would that actually stand up anywhere? So the question is that what's happened to the petition, and secondly, and also equally importantly, if any enforcement is being undertaken by district enforcement, are they actually out of contract to do any enforcement?
You understand, the next policy and resources meeting is at the end of March.
17.
So middle of March. You won't get a report back by then. Sorry?
Mr Mayor, may I ask you why not?
You won't have time to do it in all the other work. Councillor?
Sorry, can I just suggest something to you, Mr Mayor?
You may.
May I suggest that you refer the petition to that meeting, then it's up to the Policy Resources Committee what they do with the petition. To leave the petition then hanging for another 5 months, I think is an injustice to the people that actually bothered to sign it. I want to try to be constructive to you, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, actually,
Mr Mayor, I'm questioning whether we need a report to come back to it's a legal question. We can probably get, I'm not here to give legal advice, and the leader obviously isn't in this area of law either, but it's a legal question. Can it be extended for that period of time? Simple. If it isn't, then as Councillor Whipp has said, it's finished. Do we need a report? It's a simple question.
I've already seen advance. Is still legal?
Need a solicitor, come on, sorry.
In my view, there's no doubt that the contract is legal and runs until July.
Can I just see why July, Philip? Where's July come from?
Because in February, the council said extend it for 12 months. It never got going because of coronavirus. And it was only in July that the staff were engaged by district enforcement, and it started running from July 21 or 12 months to July 23.
Does that answer your question?
It answers my question, but the petition is yours, Mr Mayor, and I'm seeking your direction. I'm only suggesting to you as the Mayor that you send it to the March meeting.
Yeah, I actually agree with you, and we will refer it to the next meeting. It's at least divisible. Yeah, present it and then we'll go from there. Is that okay? Apologies
Just a couple of final comments. It's been questioned the benefit of the service that has been outsourced and provided. Comments from officers are that they have managed to achieve, with the additional resource released internally, 4-fold increase in fighting prosecutions direct consequence of the additional resource provided at Pendle Council by outsourcing this service fourfold increase their plans of achieving fly tipping prosecutions. And just another interesting statistic, targeting offenders in the area, 90% of the prosecutions since April last year were for littering, specifically cigarette butts, cigarette packets. These are hardly issues that all of us shouldn't be affording on the floor. Chucking cigarettes on the floor, it's 90% of the prosecutions they've managed to achieve on behalf of the borough. I applaud them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers? Will you vote on the amendment? Councillor Richmond,
Yeah.
you vote on your amendment.
Yes.
All those in favour? All those against? Voting against. We're now voting on the substantive motion. All those in favour?